Hi ladies and gentlemen, I am Amirul, a PhD candidate from University of Malaya, Kuala Lumpur. I will be sharing our work on overeducation and its effect on wages among young Malaysians. And let me begin with some background of introduction of the study. The aspirations to improve the quality of labour market have been translated into several policy documents, mainly the Malaysia Education Blueprint, the 11 Malaysian Plan, and the Shared Prosperity Vision. These three policy documents in general gives priority to enhance the human capital in order to remain competitive in the labour market. In addition to that, the productive employment of young people in the population is also crucial in the context of country's demographic dividend. Malaysia is in a spot to seize demographic dividend, where it is actually a window of opportunity for the country to utilize the potential of the workforce, especially the youngsters. So, the scenario presented earlier led to our current investigation, where we aim to answer two main questions. First, we wanted to see what are the factors determine education-job mismatch among young Malaysians. And secondly, we would like to see what is the effect of education-job mismatch on earnings among the young Malaysians. Here are some definitions for the study. Youth in this context is young people in the population who age between 15 to 29 who are in transition or already transited. Transited youth here meaning that those who are currently employed and perceive that they are already land to a satisfactory and good jobs during the time of survey conducted. The measurement of education job mismatch then is based on the objective approach that classified based on the minimum educational attainment required for a particular jobs. And the overskilling is the subjective measurement on whether the current job is actually commensurate with the level of education. And earnings in the context of the current study refers to the total remuneration in cash, ringgit Malaysia, that is payable to young workers counted as a payroll. And total sample of young workers in this study comprised of 3,070 respondents, and it covers across Malaysia. On the determinants of education mismatch, I will explain a bit in terms of what our literature reviews say. In general, studies in this area indicate that human capital factors such as education and training as its main determinants, while other demographic background also part of it. Studies in the local context in this area of research mostly focus on fresh graduate and employees in a specific sector like manufacturing and also services sectors. There is so far no study found, at least at the local context, that focus on young workers per se. And in terms of the measurement mismatch, most studies adopting subjective mismatch measurement instead the objective measurement. While for our current study, we wanted to address these two measurements, both objective and subjective. It is actually commonly noted that overeducated employees would receive a less amount of earnings than those who are undereducated or well-matched. However, the consequences of education job mismatch on earnings has drawn less attention so far, as to at least in the Malaysian context. Today, there is lacking on empirical studies in observing the influence of education job mismatch, in particular the case of overeducation on earning if mismatched employees who are employed in a profession that are not related to their education level. So, to answer our research questions, we employed binary logistic regression to answer the first research question, since the outcome is whether overeducation or not overeducated, and overskilling or not overskilling. Next, we use OLS, ordinary least square, based on mean variance earning function to answer the second research question. These are some of the results of the study. To address possible biases in the analysis, we firstly employ the weightage for our data set, so that the data are we would avoid the imbalance and on the analysis. So By using the Labour Force Survey 2018 by the Department of Statistics Malaysia, we use the information as the population baseline for the dataset as the data comprised of information on young workers aged between 15 to 29. So in our case, the weighting procedure is applied for three main demographic characteristics that are location, which is urban and rural, gender, male and female, and as well as the age group. Then the table 1 summarizes the weighted and unweighted distribution of the dataset in line with the young workers population in Malaysia based on the Department of Statistics 2019. And as you can see from the table here, after weightage is applied, we could see that the sample distribution are actually mirroring the population distribution of young workers. This table 2 displays the descriptive analysis in mean shares of young workers according to their mismatched statuses and several demographic backgrounds. The overeducated and overskilled young workers amounted about 23% and 10% respectively. The finding aligned with the prior study by McGuinness et al. That conclude the incidence of mismatch is higher in developing economies than in developed economies. The over-education rate among the young workforce aged 15 to 29 vary between countries. And based on the study by Sparboom and Staniva, they found that the rate of over-education in developing country ranges between 1.6 to 63%. With a total average of 16%, and this survey was conducted for 26 selected developing countries over the world, and this is actually not too far with what we found from our SWTS dataset. And as you can see from table 3, it depicts the proportions of overeducated and overskilling by months after graduation. More than half of those overeducated and overskilled young workers are actually in transition for more than 2 years. And for young workers in transition, securing the first job after graduation may or may not be their first transited jobs. And in comparing with the prior study, the Mohd et al. In 2016 have found that the transited employment is also longer in some Middle East and North African countries. And it is for about 21.4 months. And in our case, the mean is actually about more than that, about 39 months. So the overall school to work length is about 39 months in Malaysian context. In the context of labor market transition in Malaysia, it is clear that the country has a problem in effectively providing a good and satisfactory job for the young workers, especially for those who have tertiary education. And the potential growth of the economy and the country will be difficult as the cost for social and economic assistance and allocation to support more young workers who have difficulties finding a job match of transited employment in the labor market. And among those overeducated young workers, 14% think that they are overskilled. More than half are males, the majority are singles and from urban areas. As could be expected, the percentage of overeducation is persistent among those with tertiary education qualifications. Among those overskilled, 1/3 are actually overeducated, more than half are males, more than a third with non-tertiary education, and the majority are from an urban area and single. The incidence of education job mismatch also led to inefficiency in the workforce, where those with over and underutilized workforce would face negative returns to their wages. In table 4 here, you could see that a binary logistic regression estimated of the likelihood of two regression model. First is being overeducated and secondly of being overskilled. And a figure represented in the table are in terms of odds ratio. And in overall, the logistic model for both are significant. And the likelihood of being overeducated is actually higher among those who staying in urban area and those from rich background families, and those who are, and also persistent among those who are working in mining sector, manufacturing services, and those with lengthier school to work period. And by field of study, those with education, health, welfare, and service related fields have actually higher likelihood of being overeducated than other fields. And result also shows that the possibility of overeducation is higher among females, it is lower as workers get older, and higher among those already married. And the likelihood of being overskilled is higher among those with short cycle tertiary education. That means those with skill certification, pre-university and whatnot. And the distribution of education job outcome based on the field of study has, of course, influenced the education job outcome, mainly for the incidence of overeducation. And those with arts, humanities, social sciences, and businesses and general courses are also found to be more likely to be overskilled. And this table 5, as you could see, it shows the result for the wage gap obtained from the OLS estimation. And the overall model are significant with 25% and 23% of R-squared value respectively. And it indicates that the wage gap is actually relatively higher for overeducation, or of those who are overeducated, about 21.3%, but slightly lower for overskilled, only about 6%. As already mentioned, the earning received by both overeducated and overskilled workers are lower than the total average. Hence, the OLS result shown in this table could explain the effect of overeducation and overskilling on wages independently in two separate model estimates. And other control variables such as gender, age, and other demographic variables are also found to be significant and contribute to whether increase or decreasing of wages for undereducated and overskilled young workers. And to address the possible bias in the sample selection in the analysis, we employed the Heckman sample selection correction as presented in this respective table. So Heckman two-step procedure is utilized through, firstly, the main Minserian earning equation, and secondly, the binary logistic regression estimate for the probability of mismatch. And the sample correction presented based on Heckman estimate shows that the results are actually relative to the estimate with both overeducation and overskilling that I showed earlier. And these two-step Heckman sample selection model also involve a regression of probit model in order for us to find this inverse Mills ratio. But I've not included this in this article due to the time consuming. But as what we found, the inverse Mills ratio give an indication, inverse Mills ratio give indication the existence of sample selection bias in the dataset if we reject the hypothesis. So when we run the analysis, we find that we fail to reject the absence of sample selection bias. And just as importantly, on the analysis, there is no particularly large differences in the estimated slope of coefficient. And some of the discussion and policy implication that we could discuss from this finding is that in terms of incidence of overeducation, of overskilling are persistent among the young Malaysians. As the country progresses well in the human resources and with higher education attainment, and it is important to ensure the quality of jobs in the country is enough to cater the supply of labor. Also, the country should also not just concern about to increase its human capital stock by producing more tertiary educated workforce. The central question is that the country should enhance its quality of human capital with more efficient ways and more efficient allocation. And secondly, in terms of the lengthy transition among the younger Malaysian, the young people actually in need for more assistance to secure a good job and matching job during their transition. They need help. They need government assistance for this. And various factors significantly affecting both overeducation and overskilling. It depends on the social status, on the family background and whatnot. And another important determinant of the mismatch is the field of education or a field of study. So for this, what is important is that we need the policy to guide young people to choose the right kind of field of study that meets the labor demand upon graduation. What is more important is that young people should be given a realistic education to achieve realistic employment opportunities in the future. So an up-to-date and real-time information on the labor market. Information and demand is crucial and need to be reached to not just young people, it also to the most needed segment in the population. It is essential to provide establishing skill anticipation for preparing labor supply with future skills needed as well. And result also shows that the likelihood of over-education is higher among females and higher among those who are already married. Women in general, as can be heard from the literature as well, have less prospect in the job market compared to male. And they are also known for having higher unemployment risks, which could be a reason for them to be over-educated and over-skilled. If the policy cannot uplift women to be better in the labor market, it will affect their participation rates in the labor force. While we acknowledge the women are outperformed in academic, especially in higher learning institutions, the opportunity to contribute to the economy through the labor market should not be ignored. And these are the key reference for the study. And with that, thank you for your attention. Bye.